Hello, everyone. My name is Terrence Settle. I'm a student at Northwest Arkansas Community College. I was elected president of the Student Government Association in July. Here with me today is Connor Odom, an NWACC alumni that transferred to Princeton University. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing really good on this fine Sunday afternoon.
So I wanted to do this interview because I see a lot of similarities in our experience. I enrolled at NWACC earlier this year. I'm also interested in transferring to Ivy Plus schools, and I've met a few others at NWACC with the same goal. So I was hoping you could shed some light on the process and what it was like for you. So let's go get to the first question if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can you tell us a bit about your life before enrolling at NWACC?
So I grew up in South Carolina. I went to a public high school. I've always been interested in filmmaking. That's always been like filmmaking and the arts. Theater was always my big thing growing up. I was more of a theater kid than a sports kid. So my dad offered to help financially support me to go to a boarding school in Michigan called Interlochen Arts Academy. I studied filmmaking there for 2 years. It was kind of like a arts based high school. I spent half my time in classes, half my time doing my art form, which was filmmaking. And that led me to an acceptance at USC Film School in California, which is like one of the best film schools in the world. I was going to attend in 2015, but I did a gap year to figure out some finances, and I ended up deciding not to attend. And I ended up starting to work professionally as a videographer and a filmmaker in Arkansas. I had some family in Arkansas that led me out to the area. I worked for a church for several years when I first started out, as well as some other nonprofits and private companies in Arkansas doing some freelance work. Worked for around 5 years between 2015 and 2020. I had a brief stint in Florida where I worked there for a bit, but eventually got back to Arkansas right when COVID hit the U.S. in March of 2020. I took a 2-year deal to do commercial production work for ABC 4029, which is in Rogers. So I was locked in there. I had a lot of time on my hands because of everyone working from home. And my girlfriend at the time was actually finishing up her RN school. And so she was in school. My other sisters were in school. So I felt like, why not just give college a shot again? So I looked into NWACC pretty last minute, like around like early August of 2020, was able to get the Arkansas Challenge Scholarship via a personal connection, was able to apply for that late and get approved for that, as well as get my Pell Grant certified through FAFSA. It was all just very serendipitous. And I took these classes online, and slowly across that first semester and that second semester, got really invested in just kind of trying out new classes, learning new things. I took a chemistry class that I really appreciated with Professor Lois Chen, who really just kind of changed the way I perceived education, the way I perceived how teachers and students work together. I had always thought that teachers were like my enemy in high school. I didn't like teachers. I didn't like the idea of being talked down to, whereas Professor Chen like re-engineered how I thought about it and made me realize that it was more of like a lateral thinking. Like we're working together to solve problems and learn things, which I really appreciated. So after I had that class, my second semester in NWACC, I really got invested in where could I take this experience at NWACC and where could I go with it. Initially, I wanted to try to transfer to USC and finish out my dream of going to USC for film. But I had a mentor who was a former screenwriter in the industry, really recommend that I look into the Ivy League schools due to the financial aid and the just way more endless opportunities that will come from that. So I realized that there are certain programs at schools like Princeton and Yale and Brown, as well as other similar schools that were non-traditional student friendly. I was going to be 25 when I applied in 2022. And so I was looking for programs that were looking for transfer students that had a non-traditional path, that had a different perspective on education. And I really fit the bill for that. Around spring of 2021, after a year of going through NWACC, I decided I'm really going to hustle on this and dedicate my next year at NWACC to keeping my 4.0 and really adding to my resume. And so I'll have a really strong application. And so going into that last year, I took a heavy load of classes. I had some classes in person, some classes online, a lot of heavy STEM classes like physics and calculus to really up my transcript. And I ended up applying to 8 like Ivy Plus schools, and I was admitted to Princeton, Yale, and Brown. Yale and Brown, I was admitted to their non-traditional student programs, and then Princeton, I was admitted just as a transfer. And I ended up deciding to go to Princeton in May of 2022.
How did you feel, enrolling at a community college?
I'm a very efficient guy. I'm a film editor. I shoot video. A lot of my career, I've worked on probably over 1,000 video projects in my career at this point, and I've had to learn ways to optimize that, like how I organize footage, how I edit footage. My mind is very efficient, so I don't think for me it was ever a question of, oh, well, NWACC is less prestigious or less rigorous than the University of Arkansas. It was just more efficient. It was cheaper overall. It was able to be online, during the pandemic. I'm sure Arkansas also had online classes during the shutdown as well, but it just was so much easier to enroll at NWACC. I mean, the fact that I was able to, get multiple scholarships, get my classes set up in about several weeks just shows how easy it was to do it. And I didn't really ever have a thought of it being a less than option because of how efficient it was.
Most people I've spoken to at NWACC plan to transfer to the U of A, the University of Arkansas. But what made you decide to go the Ivy Plus route?
Initially, so having gotten in, I think because I had gotten into USC out of high school back in 2015, I think I knew that I was capable of going to a top school. USC is like a top 25 school in the country. So I felt that because I had gotten into that kind of school before, I could probably do it again, but maybe aim even higher this time. And then also realizing that a lot of these schools like a Princeton or a USC, Pomona College in California that I also applied to, are liberal arts-based schools. So they really allow you to explore a lot of different topics and curriculums, whereas a school like U of A is very major driven. And especially as a transfer, you basically have no time to explore once you're there. You have to get all of your classes done pretty immediately for your major. So, say I'd gone to U of A for communications, I would have just had no room to breathe around what the exact classes I had to complete and take to graduate in that, 4-year time frame. Whereas schools like Princeton, when you apply as a transfer, even though I had 2 years done at my community college, they actually give you the option to start over as a first-year student and only transfer several credits in, so you have the ability to really explore. And as a filmmaker who has a lot of interests in Christianity and religion, also, I have a lot of, photography interests. I'm interested in writing. I'm interested in English. I wanted to have a wide open curriculum to try a lot of things. And so those top schools with great financial aid and liberal arts curriculum were way more friendly to me than like a state school like Arkansas.
Right. I feel much the same. Just more opportunities, I think.
And and also too, I think psychologically, I actually didn't even apply to U of A because I didn't want to give myself the option to stay. I had been in Arkansas for 7 years to that point between 2015 and 2022. I knew I wanted a change of pace. And so I only applied to schools actually on the coasts to force myself to make that an option. It's like the burn the ships mantra from Cortez, which I really bought into my sophomore year at NWACC.
More on that, can you walk us through the process of transferring from NWACC to Princeton?
Sure. So at this point, it's 2024. I've been at Princeton for 2 years. I've probably advised, several hundred transfer hopefuls to top schools, and a lot of them are from community colleges. And so I feel like the NWACC model is very replicable to a lot of other CCs. Maybe not like honors colleges like Miami-Dade Honors College in Florida, things like that. But for most community colleges in the country, it's pretty similar. I took a wide range of like GE type classes at NWACC. Like, I did calculus, I did intro to world history, I did comparative politics, English composition, very standard classes, so that when I applied as a transfer, it'd be easy for me to take a comparative politics class and meet a political science requirement at a top school. A lot of community college students, unfortunately, take more like major specific classes, like a financial accounting or like a RN type class that really kind of pigeonhole your ability to transfer those credits later on. I took a wide range of classes intentionally so that when I applied, it would be easy for those classes to transfer over. And then also I started pretty early. So I did a year at NWACC where I just kind of explored, tried things out. And then around March or April of that first year, I really got just started getting the ball rolling on research on all my schools. I started out with a list of 25 top schools that I wanted to apply to. Eventually that narrowed down to 8 schools that I felt all 8 I would enjoy going to. I didn't prestige chase or clout chase. I just went after 8 schools that had great financial aid, that were in line with what I was after as a student, as a professional, and I put all my eggs in those baskets.
So you think selecting less major specific classes, did you do that for more flexibility in terms of major, or do you think that gives a better chance for admissions?
So a school like Arkansas, has a transfer agreement with NWACC where you can take very specific classes within business, within, pre-med, et cetera, that would transfer directly to Arkansas because they have a great relationship. So that's totally fine. If you're going to NWACC and I have a family, or I have, a girlfriend or a boyfriend, I want to stay in Arkansas. If you're going to do that for some reason, then that's totally fine to take those classes early and get a lot of them out of the way, because they might be technically easier in NWACC. And that's just the perception of a community college. Maybe that's not true, but maybe it's easier to take it earlier on as opposed to later when you want to be focusing more on thesis work or job applications as a senior, for instance. But in my case, because I knew that I wasn't going to go to Arkansas and I was applying to top schools, they have very strict transfer requirements. So for example, at Princeton, you're not able to meet a major requirement class with a transfer credit. Now, what I can do is take my Calculus 1 class at NWACC and use that to satisfy my quantitative reasoning requirement at Princeton, but I can't use Calculus 1 to take care of an economics math requirement. Once you're inside of a department, you need to have classes at the school to count for that requirement. Overall, with your core curriculum, your GEs, they'll be fine. So that's why I kept things very, very general, so that when I applied, I'd have the most flexibility and I'd be able to transfer as many credits as possible. Princeton allows you to transfer at maximum 11 credits from outside of Princeton into their system. And I was able to get 11 out of 11 because I was strategic with what classes I chose at NWACC.
And what challenges did you face in the transfer process?
I'm very fortunate that I naturally had what you'd call a spike in the application realm. I have a spike of filmmaking and visual storytelling that I was really able to play on in all my application materials, all my essays, my extracurriculars, my letter of recommendations, my work samples I sent in were all based around film and creative work. And I was able to talk about that in my essays to all these schools and say why I wanted to take my knowledge of filmmaking, and I applied as an economics major to all my schools because I wanted to explore the marriage between filmmaking and artistry and business, and I felt that doing that at an Ivy League type school was the best place to do that. So I was able to easily speak about both those interests and give a strong reason for transferring, because I couldn't explore that hyper focused interest at many other schools outside of a top school that has great finance economics connections as well as great film industry connections. So that it gave me an automatic great reason to apply, whereas many other students don't have a great reason. They just want to go to a top school because it looks good on the resume. I think if you have a great reason tied to a specific interest that is part of your application, it makes the path so much easier for you to find the right schools and then communicate why you want to be a great transfer applicant in your essays.
And what extracurriculars did you engage in NWACC, and which do you think were most beneficial for you in the transfer process?
Well, so I went to NWACC between fall of 2020 and spring of 2022, so right during the COVID spike. And so my first year, I actually never went to campus because it was all online. However, I was able to find opportunities like Model United Nations through Professor Matt Evans, who's excellent. That was an online, I did multiple online Model UN conferences through his classes and through his opportunities. I was also able to do a couple of on Zoom based honors student association like meetings and hangouts. And that was a great way to meet people. So those were kind of my two key areas, were just the honors student association and then Model UN. I actually tried to get a film club started at NWACC that I literally got the paperwork filed. I had a professor attached to it, and I tried doing like an Oscar pool, I think in 2021. And we did, and I had no entries. I literally sent it out to the entire student body. I tried to recruit for it. I had zero interest. And that was a major failure, but I tried just because I wanted to make sure that my schools I was applying to as a transfer knew that I was like trying to branch out, but it was so difficult with COVID in mind. I will say though that once we got back on campus in 2021, I was able to do more in-person things like in-person honor student association meetings. I was able to do an in-person Model UN event. I was able to go represent NWACC at the Honors Council Conference in Kansas in March of 2022. For me, it was things that, one, were utilizing my skills, like with HSA, my skills as a leader and trying to connect people. With Model UN, my skills as a writer and an arguer. That's a big skill in that field. But also both of those were connected to professors. Professor Chesney, who was excellent, and also Professor Jim Lawton, who I presented a paper for his class at the council conference. I had Dr. Evans and Professor Lawton write rec letters for me for all my colleges, and that relationship that I built with them was critical in those rec letters being so powerful. Now I didn't like talk to Matt because I wanted him to write an essay for me down the line. I just happened to have a great relationship with him that led to an even stronger letter. So I think for me, at NWACC, it's about finding extracurriculars that you can find leadership opportunities in, things that align with your actual interests. They're not just there for like a resume patter. And then most importantly, ECs that give you access to awesome professors that you can build strong bonds with.
How would you compare your strengths to the average transfer student?
To be honest, I don't think I'm nearly as smart as many other transfers that got into Princeton or top schools. I think my biggest skill is I'm incredibly intentional and I'm very creative and I understand my value. And so when I applied to Princeton, I didn't talk about how smart at math I was or how smart at science I could be. I didn't talk about my potential. I talked about what I had already done. I said, look, I've been working as a filmmaker and a videographer and a commercial director for 7 years. I've done hundreds of projects, worked with a lot of people. I've done a lot of experience in my field, and I only want to get better. And I think that Princeton or Yale or Georgetown or Stanford, all these schools I applied to, I think those schools will actually help me on my journey. But if I don't go to those schools, I'll figure it out. And I like literally in both my Brown and Princeton essays, I specifically said like Brown or no Brown, I will achieve my goals. But it'd be awesome to have Brown to support me in that. And right. I think that relationship as a transfer applicant is so key because like so many kids want to go to these top schools because of what it'll do for them, when I think it's a two-way street. So I just told these schools like, hey, look, I'm a film guy. This is what I do. I'll bring that to campus. I'll be able to do a lot of cool creative work while I'm there. And that's going to add to the campus, but also help me. So I think I recognized what my strengths were and I played into that. And I wasn't trying to be anybody else but myself when I applied.
A lot of people have this idea that it's kind of a gated community, but I feel like the truth of it is that they want, good students. They're going to look for the best students. It's not like a one-way relationship.
A lot of people think that to get into Harvard, you have to be a well-rounded student, when in reality, Harvard wants a well-rounded class. They don't want 100 amazing people at everything. They want 10 ballerinas. They want 3 incredible violinists. They want 5 amazing singers. They want 12 incredible coders. They want the best in these spiked areas to round the class out, because the brilliance of Harvard and these top schools is they're putting the best in these specific areas all in the same place. And it creates this awesome synergy. Like at Princeton, I am like the bottom of the barrel when it comes to math and science and stuff. But as a creative, I'm the top dog. And so there's all these like fields that you get to like combine with people. And now I have incredible connections across computer science and physics and, math that I can call upon when I have interest in those things or questions about those things. And then when someone wants photos or videos of certain things, they know who to go to as well. So it's a very common misconception that you have to check all these boxes when you apply to a top school, when in reality, just hone in on those top things that you're great at and embrace that. If you're like an amazing writer, if Stanford doesn't want that year, that's their loss. You own who you are, but maybe Harvard wants that year when you apply. So you'd so much rather, show who you are and then see what schools need that in that cycle.
I've met a lot of amazing people in honors and SGA. And when I talk to them, I'll say something like, hey, you're a really hard worker. Have you ever considered like a top 20 or an Ivy Plus school? And there's kind of this idea like, oh, I'm not smart enough. There's no point, that kind of thing. What would you say to those people?
In any top school, almost every student is going to experience imposter syndrome at some point. Even the smartest, brightest STEM student in the world at MIT might not be the best person socially or might not be the best communicator. And when they go into a classroom on the first day and they talk to their lab partner, and that partner is like so charismatic and engaging, and they're like, oh, I'm not that, but you might be smarter than them at STEM. Like you're going to at any top school, you're going to have a moment of inadequacy. And so it kind of unites the whole student body that we're all at the same time battling our own insecurity about our inadequacies. And so through that, you just learn to embrace what you're good at and find the right people to be around, so you don't have to experience that insecurity. So I tell any transfer applicant, especially people at NWACC that don't think that they're good enough, anyone that goes to these schools isn't good enough. Like if you actually offer a great thing to that school, you should apply and go bring that great thing to that school. Like there at the time, I experience it all the time in classes at Princeton that I am not smart enough to be there. But then I remember like, okay, no, like I got in for a reason. I was chosen for a reason. I do have something to offer. And yes, I may have to work harder at certain areas to like catch up to these like awesome private school kids from New York and these incredible STEM people from like across the world. But I know that I got in for a reason and I can own what I'm really good at and then, pick up my deficiencies in other areas. You have to shoot your shot. And if you just own who you are and what you're good at, that might be just the thing that, Yale needs.
Would you say essays play a larger role in the admission process for transfer students as opposed to high schoolers?
Well, it goes back to what I said about potential. In my essays, I spoke heavily about what I had done as a filmmaker. Like one of my best essays was talking about how I worked with an African-American actor as my lead character in my last short film. And we spoke often, the film dealt with racism and race relations a little bit. So we spoke very heavily and candidly about my experiences as a white guy, his experiences as an African-American man, and how he had to, how I had to humble myself to understand his experience to create a better character on screen. Very complex issue, very touchy issue, but I was able to really speak about it in an eloquent way and talk about what I learned through that and how I grew as a director and an artist through that experience. And I spoke about that in almost all my applications. I made sure to talk about that as a concept. Whereas high school students might say, oh, I want to have that experience. Like, oh, I haven't gotten to do that yet, but maybe eventually I'll get to do that. I think what's great about a transfer applicant is oftentimes they've already gotten to have great experiences just by nature of being older and by having a little more life experience and maybe some career experience. So I think that like the essays are critical in selling your experience and selling what I would call proven potential versus just potential. Like I'm saying, here's what I've already done. I want to get better at it. I want to get better at it. And I think that through your school, I can. Whereas a lot of applicants will say, well, I think I can be good at this. And then Princeton's like, well, we already have this guy over here who has told us he's good at this and has shown us he's good at this. So why would we say yes to you when you're just talking about what you think you can do versus this person who's already started to do it? That's why I think at NWACC, my greatest extracurricular was my career as a commercial producer. So I talked very heavily about that. But also wanted to make sure that I, gave my best effort at NWACC with Model UN and Honors Association. So the essays are huge.
And how would you say NWACC supported you in your transfer journey? And what do you think could be improved?
Well, before this interview was trying to figure out the name of my transfer advisor at NWACC. She was an amazing woman who really gave me some great advice along the way, and I can't find her name. I haven't had access to my NWACC email in a couple of years, unfortunately. But I will shout her out and say that she, even though I knew that at the end of the day, transferring was on me, it was my responsibility to make sure that the schools had all the information they needed, from my financial aid application stuff to my essays to everything. It was on me. I still wanted to give NWACC a shot and, see what advice and help they could provide me. And I got this incredible advice from my advisor at NWACC to retake the ACT. And I, at the time during COVID, no schools were requiring test scores for application. And most transfer schools, because students applying are older, they're not going to require it. It's always optional. But she told me, why not just go take it and see what happens? And if you get a great score, send it. If not, you don't have to send it. And I ended up retaking it, and I got a 33 on my first try, and was able to refine some things and raise some scores. And I was able to send a 34 super score to my schools. And if you're watching this and you're like, oh my gosh, Connor, I'm never gonna touch that. I'm not that smart. You're privileged, all that stuff. Sure, maybe that's true. But in my case, because I just listened to her advice and just gave it a shot, and luckily I was good at parts of the test and was able to improve other parts of it, and being able to submit a top ACT score along with my other stuff was just a huge bonus in my application. But I will say that wasn't like the selling point. And I've talked with advisors at Princeton and Yale about this, and that was not why I got in, was because I had a high ACT. So don't think that if you're watching this, but it just gives a good example of, like, I think NWACC can help people and give good advice, but because the resources are so few, it really puts the transfer advisors at a disadvantage, because most of them are working with like schools in the nearby area and don't have enough bandwidth to look around the periphery of Arkansas and the Midwest to look at schools in California, schools in the Northeast, to try to send our students from NWACC to top schools. So if they had better staff, just more staff, more resources, more money to be able to take to say they could have told me, hey, you can apply for a scholarship to be able to go travel and tour these schools, and I could have applied to get a $500 scholarship from NWACC to go fly up to New York to go tour Columbia or something. That would have been an awesome resource that currently is not provided by NWACC, for instance. So I think that the people I worked with were really great, but they were clearly stretched thin by the lack of resources.
What has your experience been like at Princeton?
I said it earlier, but it's a lot of imposter syndrome. I definitely feel like I'm not that smart very often, but that's kind of the point of Princeton, is to put you into a room of a lot of intelligent and driven people and create this awesome synergy. So, a lot of failure at first, actually. Like when I first got there, there's just so many talented people that you try out for clubs, you apply to things, and you don't get a lot of things. I've been a singer for instance, my whole life, for instance. And at Princeton, the a cappella groups are a big deal. So if you've seen Pitch Perfect, it's just like that. And I wanted to be in one of the a cappella groups. So I tried out for the 3 oldest guys groups and didn't get in any of them. And I had to go join the chapel choir and take voice lessons to improve my abilities. And then I came back in the spring and I got into one of the top groups. And so that was something. I was involved in some other extracurriculars at first at Princeton that I now am no longer involved in, because I've kind of graduated to some more sophisticated things. So yeah, a lot of initial failure, but if you're able to be resilient and just keep meeting people, keep trying things out, you'll eventually find the right home. So yeah, Princeton was a lot of failure at first. But because of my resilience, I was able to kind of roll through it.
And how do the academic and social environments differ between Princeton and NWACC?
They're like completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, Princeton is like, it's a different world. We call it the orange bubble. You know, we're in a suburban area in New Jersey, so it's basically just our campus and like a small town nearby. So you are literally like, it is just you and the student body and the faculty, and that's it. I will say, and I've told a lot of people at Princeton this, but I find the NWACC professors better than Princeton's professors. Now, part of that is because Princeton's professors are more wired towards research and publishing than they are towards actually teaching. So I found that like at NWACC, like I could name multiple teachers like Professor Chesney, Professor Chen, Professor Lawton, Dr. Evans, you know, Professor Thomas in physics that were so much more hands-on with me than NWACC, than Princeton people are. So that was a really cool distinction. But the environments academically are just so much more rigorous at Princeton. I mean, I'll get assigned 150 pages of reading a week. You know, I'll get assigned, you know, a 15-page paper I have to finish in a week or two. At Princeton, we have the senior thesis, which everyone writes an 80 to 120 page research paper as a senior, which to many NWACC students is like insanely daunting. So, but they do a good job of preparing you over time for those things. Like when you first come in, a lot of your early classes are geared towards kind of showing you the Princeton way. So academically, like they have so many resources for you, like in terms of like our writing center, our tutoring. Like I struggled heavily with my foreign language requirement at Princeton. So I had Italian tutors like and like every step of the way that were very helpful for me. But I had to be the one communicating on the front end to actually get that help. So it's a two-way street. Socially, Princeton is hilarious because you're putting a bunch of like just driven yet sometimes elitist people all in the same place. So you have to have a very good head on your shoulders to survive that. You have to kind of roll with the punches. At Princeton, we have things called eating clubs. And I'm a member of one of the eating clubs called Tiger Inn. And you have to get into a very selective process called Bicker. And I tried it my first year. I actually did not get into a club that I wanted to. And so I tried again the next year. I did get in. But that was a very competitive, strange social process that you have to go through. And a lot of the transfers at Princeton do not like that and are more geared towards just normal interaction. Yeah. But for me at Princeton, I really wanted to do the whole experience and meet a lot of people. And so joining an eating club was part of that. So yeah, academically and socially, it's very different, very, very challenging. But if you're willing to just roll with the punches and give it all a shot, then you'll enjoy it.
A few people were curious about the financial aid and scholarships situation for Ivy Plus schools. Can you tell us about your experience with that?
I had to pay more for NWACC than I have had to pay for Princeton because Princeton's financial aid is the best in the world. Most Ivy Plus schools have incredible financial aid. MIT, Stanford, Yale, John Hopkins, you know, like all these kind of schools have incredible financial aid. So I applied as an independent student. You know, I've been on my own since 2016. So I applied as an independent. And when I got in, you know, there was like a little percentage wheel of, you know, how much they're going to cover. And it was like, you know, 95% they're going to cover. And all I have to cover is just my own expenses in terms of, you know, food I might buy or, you know, like just things I buy throughout the year. But like food, like room, board, tuition, food, it's all covered. And at Princeton, if your family or yourself makes under 6 figures, you will get full financial aid. So and most of the Ivies are like this. Yeah. So if anybody at NWACC has a fear about, oh, I can't afford it, that's absolute BS. You have to apply. And even in the case of, I actually know several transfers that got financial aid packages that were not accurate because like for instance, I have a friend who his stepfather had a lot of assets, but they weren't, but he was no longer supporting his son. So because of the assets being a lot, like he got a pretty like weak financial aid package, but he was actually able to negotiate that with our financial aid office at Princeton and get a full ride. So anybody that has issues with that or fears about that, I would just apply.
Many people get in their head.
Sorry,
Oh,
NWACC
sorry.
is good though. NWACC is great. NWACC was solid with financial aid.
Yeah.
I got in terms of my challenge scholarship and the Pell Grant was very helpful in NWACC. And I did receive several academic scholarships at NWACC that I had to apply for. So there's no shade to NWACC because NWACC was incredibly helpful with financial aid. But I just want to put that in perspective that I paid less for Princeton than NWACC, which is crazy.
Many people get in their heads about academic performance, especially during finals. What would you say has been your biggest failing at Princeton, and how did you get through it?
I had never in my life gotten less than a C plus in a class. I had like a 3.5 GPA in high school, which is like pretty good, not amazing, but pretty good. Mostly A's and B's. I had all A's at NWACC. And then when I went to Princeton, I actually got my first ever D, and I barely passed one of my Italian classes. I mentioned earlier that I struggled very much with my foreign language requirement. At Princeton, we do every single day. So you have an hour class a day in your language because they want you to become proficient at it. So I chose Italian because it felt like interesting. I enjoyed the culture, so I tried it. And honestly, it was my own fault how poorly it went because I was not communicative with my professor when things started to get tough. I am someone that's very independent and wants to figure it out on my own. But I failed to utilize my professors in the right way, and I would miss class a lot. I would show up late. I wouldn't do my homework because I was so overwhelmed my first year, and I barely passed the class. And so through that, I learned, okay, I have to reprioritize some things. I have to find what classes require more work than other classes. And when I came back this past fall, and I did 3 semesters of Italian. In my final semester, I told my professor from day one how much I had previously struggled, and told her, I'm going to put my time in. I'm going to do the homework. I'm going to really give it a shot. And if I have issues, I will, come to you. And I did. And then I actually, did have a lot of problems with that last semester. But because I was communicative, I went to my professor numerous times, and I actually got like several, moments of one-on-one coaching with her for the language. I was able to pass with a C plus, not great still, but much better than the D, and not nearly as bad for my GPA. So I think the key with my biggest failure there was just being communicative. You'd be so surprised what a professor will do for you if you're honest when things get bad early. Most people wait till it gets bad late, and then now you're the boy that cried wolf, and you've waited to say something till too late, and now they're not going to help you. So if you go to someone like on the front end, then you will find a lot of good results with that. Like for instance, at NWACC, I was struggling pretty early with chemistry, and so I had a kind of an iffy quiz grade on my first quiz in chemistry 3 years ago. And so I went to my professor, and I was going to like cry and be upset about it. And then we got on the call, and she was so reassuring. She was like, Connor, you're doing really well. You had some missed questions here and there. Let's walk through it. I'm happy to help you. And literally like almost every week I would have an hour or 2 hour Zoom call with Professor Lois Chen, who is just an absolute angel and was so helpful to me because I came to her early and expressed my desire for help. They want to help you, but only if you tell them early enough that you need the help.
Right. A lot of people are too afraid to reach out. So I'm glad you said that. Of all you've done at Princeton so far, what are you most proud of?
So when I mentioned earlier, it being a two-way street when you apply, I feel like my first year at Princeton, I wasn't able to really fully tap into my abilities as a filmmaker. I did a lot of like freelance videography across campus with, athletics and other, programs on campus, but I wasn't really doing what I loved to do. And so I approached a student who was part of a disbanded filmmaking club, and they had kind of fallen apart before I got there. And I said, why can't we like restart this and rebrand it and re-engineer it to be more effective? And so across my first summer, I was studying abroad. I was working abroad in Tokyo for 2 months. This is last summer, 2023. Every week I get on Zoom with Haley Mead and Kat Stewart, who were both film film people at Princeton who were both affiliated with the prior filmmaking club, but just kind of needed someone like myself that had experience to kind of re-engineer it and make sure it was going to work. And so we totally redesigned the club, gave it a new name, Princeton Pictures, got, a new Instagram, new logo, rebranded it, redesigned it, assembled a board of brand new people. And we launched it in this past fall of 2023 and went from a club with no affiliation, 0 members, to over 150 members. We produced 4 short films in 2 semesters. We had 2 successful film premieres with over 200 students attending each of them. We had Q&As with our filmmakers. We had we launched a domestic film festival this past spring that had some success. We've also had some networking events with film kids on campus, and it was all in like the first year. And that was because I really put my head down and just said, let's do this. I want this to be a thing. I want to have success in this. And to go from there being no film presence at Princeton at all because of this club falling apart to 3 months later having a film premiere of 2 short films with a Q&A after, and just huge success, was so powerful to me and showed me how cool the community at Princeton really is and how supportive they are of your endeavors if you really put your mind to it. And so to go from there not being a thing last year to there now being a thing. And I had an article written about me in our paper, and that was crazy. And
right.
Yeah. So I just think that clearly was my most, my biggest accomplishment at Princeton. It's funny with those films. What's crazy about those films is they're all beginners. Pretty much everyone at Princeton,
right.
Most film people go to USC, NYU, Chapman, UCLA. So Princeton, there's a lot of people that want to pursue filmmaking, that they actually have the resources, they have the money to do it, but they don't know how to do it. So for me, it was just kind of overseeing it. My role was vice president and founder of the club, and our president Haley oversaw a lot of our business expenses and a lot of our logistics, and I oversaw all of our productions. So I was a hands-on producer with all 4 of our films, and I was answering calls in the middle of the night. I was saving edits. I had to rescue edit one of our films this past fall. I had to give one-on-one mentorship to all of our directors. I mean, it was insane how much I put into it. But to get to see someone who had never worked on a film go from that to having their own film that they wrote, directed, and created, to see that happen for people, even from the director down to craft services, a grip, to see people get a chance to actually work on set and get on set hands-on experience that they now can take to other professions, other experiences later on, was really, really powerful.
And you're a filmmaker, you said. You've always been passionate about filmmaking. Can you tell us about some of your films? What you're most proud of?
Sure. So I got my start working for a church. And so at first, a lot of my content was based around event promotion and event recaps. So we do a women's conference, and I would go film B-roll footage of the conference and then put together a recap video, or I would do a baptism night promo, stuff like that, which is really cool and awesome, but not storytelling. And so what I did was, about a year or 2 into my experience there, I realized that we could take sermon concepts and biblical ideas and adapt them into movie versions of them. So I've done short films based around Jonah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Joseph, a handful of characters in the Bible I've done concepts based around. Whether it was a Bible story or it was a sermon concept. One of my favorites was there was a sermon about media and how media can overstimulate, our generation, and how that can go against the Bible, for instance. So I did this character, this young woman who's working in a computer office, and then all the computers turn on and feed her all this information and videos and film and TV, and it's overstimulating her, and she just gets stressed out and has to turn to God to relieve herself, essentially. And obviously it's kind of more fantastical than the real world, but it's cool to take a Christian concept and put it into a cinematic lens. So by doing that, I realized that I had a real passion for that, and so I shot my longest short film called Saint in 2021, which is not out yet. It is like my goal on my gap year this year to finally publish that film. It's been done for a couple of years. I just haven't had the time to like release it and do a festival run with the film. So now I have the time to do it. But that was a film about Saint Peter and the three denials of Peter in the night of the crucifixion. I took that concept and made it into a modern dramatic thriller set in the early 2000s. It's much more, it's kind of like Kendrick Lamar meets the Bible is like kind of like what I'm trying to do there.
Yeah.
So it was a totally like no budget film. We shot it in Arkansas, shot it mostly around Fayetteville area with like local actors, local crew. This was back in summer of 21, like between my NWACC years. So I did that as a director. But then, I've produced many short films. I've directed short films for my church. I've directed shorts this past year with my film club at Princeton. I just produced those films. I didn't direct any of them, but I did help with like the scripts and the production stuff. So I'd say most of my experience is in like either producing shorts or like directing like short form content for social media. But yeah, I've really loved this idea of like marrying Christian concepts with a modern cinematic touch.
What aspect about filmmaking speaks to you? Is there a certain film you watch that triggered that spark in you?
Well, growing up, my dad showed me a lot of the classics like Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, etc. And those were great. Really cool, creative movies. But when I was 13, I watched David Fincher's The Social Network, which is an amazing movie. It's my all-time favorite film. And I realized that movies could cover very complex characters in complex plots. And I think I had always thought as a kid that movies were about like good beats evil, the hero and the bad guys, and like just very like it was much more streamlined. And like the themes were complex, but like the characters weren't as complex. And Mark Zuckerberg is a character in that movie. He's incredibly gray, complex character. You're not really sure what he's after. You're not sure what he wants. You're not sure why he's doing what he's doing. And I just love that like so much. It was so cool as a kid to see that. And it unlocked like this other side of creative storytelling. And then now, I watch a lot of indie films that I just like, I like a film. There's a film called Short Term 12, which I love from 2013. That's very intimate, very, very direct about covering gray areas and people. And I think that inspiration ties in with my biblical fascination in that people think that a Christian character is like perfect and that I can never sin, I can never have mistakes. The Bible characters are so flawed. David is so flawed. Paul was a murderer before he was the Apostle Paul. There's just all these characters that are so flawed, and the way that cinema portrays a lot of these characters is so by the numbers and so black and white.
Yeah.
And I just want to inject gray into all of that.
Yeah.
Because the Bible is incredibly gray when it comes to the characters. Morality wise, it's black and white, but the characters are very gray. And so seeing a film like The Social Network unlocked this idea that a character could be all over the place, because that's how I think we are as people. So with my film in 2021, Saint, that character of Peter is all over the place. And that was what really drew me to the character. And a lot of the films I'm working on now, like I'm in development on a couple scripts for my, my thesis film in a couple years. And all of them are covering characters and situations that are incredibly gray. So I think that inspiration from The Social Network, 14 years ago, was like very influential.
You're not going to believe this, but that's my favorite movie too.
Is it actually? No way. I love it.
And
so much.
It's actually what inspired me to go into tech and startup
Really?
culture. And all that. So that's very funny that you say that.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it so much. And I've watched a lot of films, similar to it. And obviously, like Steve Jobs in 2015 is very similar.
Oh yeah.
I love the film, the Thing, from 1984, on John Carpenter's film. I just think that people in real life are not good or bad. Like no one is great, no one is evil. We're all somewhere in the middle. And I love that the character of Zuckerberg in that movie, you don't know if he's after because he wants the girl back. You're not sure if he's jealous of his friend. You're not sure if he's money hungry or power hungry. Like, I watch the film and I get new thoughts about the character every single time.
It's a great example of like show, don't tell. in film.
Yeah, and obviously,
Yeah.
the film has incredible score. The script is amazing. The directing's insane. The acting's great. Like obviously all the technicality is highest possible, top notch. But for
Right.
me, what really sold me and drove me to become a filmmaker was seeing the gray area of a character like that, especially a protagonist.
I understand that you've been named the creative director at the Wisdom Board, which is a startup composed of Princeton students, and it's backed by David G. Bradley, who's the chairman emeritus at the Atlantic. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. I can't say a ton because we're still in development
Sure.
on our product and where we're going with it, but I'll talk about it just more generally. So David Bradley, former chairman of the Atlantic, National Journal, he's a very successful guy in the media publishing space. He's just an incredible man. He collected a handful of Princetonians several years ago. He did not go to Princeton, but his sons went to Princeton, and he collected a handful of Princeton students in 2021. He read a book called The Defining Decade by an author, Meg Jay, who's a psychologist who is fascinated with the 20s, and that the 20s are the most critical decade in one's life. Many think that the 20s are a screw off decade. I'm going to have fun, party, live my life. And then when I turn 30, I'll be serious. Her theory is that actually the 20s are way more important than people think they are, and are the defining decade in your life. And so David read that book in 2020 and thought, why is there not more media and product and emphasis put on this decade and teaching and knowledge given to that generation? So he started to research in every occupation and career field what it means for like what it takes to be great as a CEO, or great as an artist, or great as a journalist or a researcher, and then try to trace back what makes those people good at those things to what someone's good at when they're younger. And the theory is that what you're inherently wired to do should show you what career you should take. So for me, I'm a visual. I'm like a visual synthesizer. I'm really good at taking a lot of visual concepts and putting them into one idea that communicates a message. So I can take multiple clips from a movie, multiple audio sources, video angles, messaging via film shots, and then collectively create something from that through editing. It's a very certain skill that I'm very good at, which makes me really good at my job and good at what I do. So the idea is that because I have that natural inclination, that I should be a filmmaker. Not that I want to be, but that I should be. So that's kind of our general thought behind it. And we're currently in the process of creating some sort of product. Maybe it's a class, maybe it's an online platform, maybe it's an in-person experience that helps people in their 20s identify what they are good at and then what careers they should pursue as a result. So this summer, I came on the project as a CD a creative director to oversee all of our branding. We recently launched our Instagram page and our TikTok, and we have started to put out content based around these career concepts and teaching points, and hopefully, to gain an audience and hopefully get people to understand our teaching points, but also to prepare ourselves for once we go into a product phase and begin to start marketing our products. My job right now is to oversee all content creation, all video, pictures, social media. And then we're looking now to start bringing on people underneath my umbrella to help us bolster out our content.
What is your goal with the Wisdom Board? What direction would you like to see it go?
I worked at a summer camp for 6 years called Brook Hill Ranch in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And it was a Christian camp. We did a lot of evangelistic, teaching and shepherding to our campers. But most importantly for me, I think that young people, especially Gen Z, don't have a lot of support emotionally and a lot of support intellectually. I think that they're often overlooked and are treated as dumb. I think that a lot of generations treat their next generations below them as unintelligent, insecure, not worth their time. And I'm the complete opposite. I've always loved imparting into people. I've always loved mentoring. I've loved coaching. I've loved giving knowledge down to people, especially in my fields. I've had almost 10 different interns at this point in my life work for me in different areas through content creation, filmmaking. And it's so exciting to get to see someone figure out what they're good at and figure out how they can be creative, like especially in this area, even of literally across filmmaking and across applying to an Ivy Plus. I love trying to give advice that's specific and actually helpful that someone can take and utilize. They may hear all that I have to say and get one good thing out of it, but that one good thing actually helps them. That's amazing. So for me, with the Wisdom Board, I see so much potential in actually giving people in their 20s just genuinely good advice, and not this overview that the duopoly in tech has created, where it's just if I Google how to become a software engineer, I get an AI result, or I get a Reddit post, or I get a YouTube video that's very generalized. I want specific advice. I want specific input and actual hands-on knowledge that goes through the day-to-day of someone's profession, that goes through the inherent gifts that it takes for someone to be good at their job. I want to know all those things. And I would think that people that are 20 are way smarter than we give them credit for, and would actually appreciate and pay for that information, however we decide to give it to them. So for me, as someone that, every day in my life, I work with younger people, literally at Princeton, I am in an eating club full of hundreds of 20-year-olds, and I am 28 this year. So every day in my life, I do this. I work with people that are younger than me. I think that our mission as a company is going to be just giving good, actual, useful knowledge to folks that are younger than us.
Based on your experience, what improvements would you suggest NWACC implement to make the transfer process smoother for students?
Well, I said it earlier. I think there needs to be more staff and more financial resources that are directed from the college to transferring. We should be able to fly more advisors in, bring in we often will have tabling for UCA, Arkansas Tech, which is awesome, and those should be there. But I don't know why, schools like Texas A&M, schools like UT Austin, schools like Rhodes College in Memphis, schools like Wash U in St. Louis, these are all schools that are around our area that are excellent. That why are we not tapping into that more? So I would really petition for more staffing to support people that want to go to these areas. You've taught to folks at NWACC that want to do this. I have done it and know people that wanted to do it, but they need a place to start. So having more staff and more financial resources to look into those options is critical. I also think that just hosting more events and teachings on this concept are key. I myself have told Dr. Evans, Professor Chesney, and even folks on the board at NWACC that I am always willing to help and trying to communicate proper information. And what's awesome is folks like yourself and other NWACC folks have, reach out to me, and I've been able to help. I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything. I just, think that there should be more knowledge out there. I think that if overall NWACC had more of a spirit had more of an ambitious spirit and recognized that the position that they are in, it would lead to so many excellent transfer stories.
Totally agree with you. And that's one of my goals as president of SGA this year, is just to bring more of that prestige, get people caring a little more, I think. I have a board of trustees meeting tomorrow. Would you like me to relay that or anything else to them directly?
I'm a numbers guy. I was the first Arkansas transfer to Yale or Princeton. That's crazy. Princeton, fine, because we started our program in 2018, but Yale's crazy. That should not be the case. It's ridiculous. Thinking that our best and brightest are going to wind up at Arkansas is incredibly narrow-minded. Schools, especially Ivies, are incredibly conscious of their perception in the world. If they want to seem like they are inclusive, as they are all trying to do, they cannot only recruit from the Upper East Side, New York City, and the Bay Area in California. Even though those are the two most highly condensed areas that are going to send kids to those schools, they want to branch out. They want the Montana student. They want the Nebraska student. They want the middle of nowhere Mississippi student. They want those kids because it adds to the diversity of the school. So if you're an NWACC, which you are already in a very well supported area by Bentonville with Walmart and Tyson, et cetera, and you're close to a great school in Arkansas that has great resources, you're actually so well equipped to represent the state in a strong way and send off people to excellent schools. They have to aim higher and recognize what they are capable of doing with their students. NWACC students are very driven and are way underestimated all the time and can actually achieve more if they are told that they can. Like for myself, I'm a very driven guy, so I was able to recognize that I could pull it off. And I wish that counselors at NWACC would look at someone who says, "Oh, I want to go to Arkansas Tech," and an advisor should look at them and say, "Look, you have a 3.85, great resume, great story. Why don't you apply to UT Austin? Why don't you apply to Rhodes? Why don't you apply to Emory in Georgia? Why don't you apply to Georgetown? Why don't you aim a little bit higher? And you know what? We're going to help you find financial resources to help you achieve that." Like, most of these schools will waive financial aid, will waive application fees if the student is on financial aid, which is awesome. But a lot of them don't do that automatically. So if NWACC was able to say to someone, "Hey, we'll support you with an $100 scholarship to apply to Georgetown because you're really interested in politics, international relations," that is an incredible opportunity for somebody, and you just never know what's going to happen. So I would tell the board to think bigger and to recognize the incredible position that they are in.
What advice would you give to students at NWACC who are considering transferring to a four-year university?
Focus on what you are excellent at. And if you're not excellent at something yet, just pick the next best thing. Too many students try to check a lot of boxes when they apply to places. They want to have done all these things and have all these resume checklists. These schools, especially for transfers, recognize that they have more life experience and oftentimes more career experience. They want folks that are focused on a certain thing and are really, really great at that. So if you're a great dancer, if you're a great drawer, if you're great at drawing, if you're great at writing, if you can code, if you have an AI interest, whatever that thing is for you that really drives you, really focus on that passion when you apply. And it will make you stand out so much. It's not only good for you in the school, it's also good for you strategically because, Princeton has over 1,000 kids apply every year as a transfer. But not a lot of them are going to have 4.0s. A lot are going to have, be part of their honors association. A lot of them are going to be part of, Phi Theta Kappa. A lot of them are going to have those classic, top student things. But not a lot of them are going to have a filmmaking background. So instead of trying to focus on, "Oh, I'm going to try and impress them academically," I'm going to impress them with my passion and make sure that I stand out. Because amongst the 1,000 applicants to Princeton, when I applied, it was so much easier for them to sell me because I was, the Southern filmmaker kid versus, "Oh, I was an honors smart guy," because they're all smart. So really focus on your passion, because what's cool is that you think that these admissions counselors at these top schools, they want to find ways to reject you. They actually want to find ways to empower you and sell you to the advisory board that makes the decisions. Make it easier on them to sell you if you focus on your passions and try to boil your application down to a couple of words. So for me, it was like Southern Christian filmmaker. Easy, simple, easy to digest. Figure out what is your passion and really own that when you apply, and make it easier for your admissions counselor to fight for you and earn you a spot in the school.
I think that's some great advice. Is there anything more about your journey so far that you'd like to share?
Man, don't underestimate the professors at NWACC. That's what I would just keep hitting that. Like, they're really talented. They really care about the students. They really want to help. Like, I was so shocked when I got on the phone with Professor Chen 3 years ago. And I said, "I have a lot of questions for you. I don't want to take, like, I know it's like, in my mind, I literally got on the call and was like, I have a lot of questions, but I know we only have like 10 minutes. And then she goes, Connor, like I'll talk to you for like an hour. Like, what do you need? Like, let's talk through it. Let's figure it out. And I'm not saying that every NWAC professor is going to give you multiple hours of their time all the time. But the fact that she had the heart to do that, I think is very indicative of the rest of NWAC as a whole, is they actually do care and they do want to help, but you have to put yourself out there and make yourself available for that help. I had never met Professor Jim Lawton in person before he wrote me all my rec letters for my schools. I literally met him in person one time at the honors gala at the end of my second year. And when I got an award, I got an award for the year. And when Jim spoke about me, he was so passionate. He was like, "This guy is so dedicated. He's so driven. Like none of you understand. Like you all think that you're not. You all think so little of yourselves, but you all should actually be thinking like this guy because he thinks of himself in such a better way." And he was like so passionate that it like scared me. I was like so scared at how like angrily passionate he was. But he was right, because 2 weeks later I got into 3 Ivies. So he was right. And that's pretty sick. And so I think that like I think people should take from his advice of like you just have to aim high. Because even if you aim for the moon, well, that's so cheesy. If you aim for the moon, you might hit the stars. But like it's the truth though. Like, and you utilize the NWAC professors because they do think that you are capable of a lot if you actually apply yourself.
Princeton's definitely up there. Stanford, Harvard. Just
I literally applied to all of them, all of HYPSM except for Harvard. I'm like, why did I just wish I would have, like, if I would have, you know what though? It was honestly a God thing, because I had a major migraine that day. I actually skipped work. And I literally was like so upset. I was like, oh my gosh, I need this day so bad to get all this crap done. And then I had to sleep. I couldn't work. And so I slept, and I got up like at 2 p.m. that afternoon, and I knew I had to make a decision. I was like, okay, I'm just going to cut Harvard. And I cut it. And it was tough, but it worked out in the end. But yeah, you got to start. Yeah, start early. And we had a guy, Reed. His name's Reed. I don't think he went to NWAC, Miss Pat. He went to NWAC for a year, and then went somewhere. I think he went to maybe like another community college in Arkansas for his past year. But he was waitlisted to Princeton. And I think he's going to Grinnell, which is like a liberal arts college. But I wrote a rec letter for him because I wanted him to get off the wait list. But
Princeton, their CS program is definitely better than Harvard from what I've seen. So
it is.
Yeah.
Harvard, so man, I'm telling you, man, Harvard undergrad's overrated. It's overrated.
Yeah.
I'd say us, Stanford, MIT, Yale are better. Harvard's like definitely, it's definitely in the 5, but like I just think Yale is like much more explorative, better resources in my opinion. Stanford's insane for tech and CS. Same with MIT. Just Harvard has a lot of pressure on it, and the grad schools are so important there. That's the biggest thing with Harvard, is that the grad schools are everything there, and they're really not like the undergrad. It's important. It's cool, but it's like not as important as the grad schools. Whereas MIT undergrad is very important. Us, it's like our entire focus is undergrad. And then Stanford, Yale have major grad schools, yes, but have really strong cultures in Stanford with CS entrepreneurship and startups. Yale less so with CS, but like I just like their undergrad style better.
Yeah. Well, I think that should do it for the interview. We can do a follow-up if you want after the board meeting. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights.
Totally appreciate it. I hope this helps. Obviously, I hope it'll help you, but I hope it'll help the board, help others at NWACC, do more, because I think they totally should. And I feel like if I can pull it off, like if I get to 3 Ivies, like I think that like someone at NWACC could easily do that again or get into like another, like an Ivy plus. Like it's totally possible. But yeah, man, let's talk after. Yeah, focus on the board thing, kill that, and we'll talk later.
Okay. This has been Terrence Settle and Connor Odom. Thank you all for watching.